Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Rosenblum, and you're watching the Theo Nightly video for the 3rd of February here in 2022, and we're going to have another earnings-based video. I'm going to start off with Amazon because that's where the attention. Not even going to try to build suspense because Amazon shares will look step by step on the right. They just reported earnings. Earnings was about 27.75 per share. We'll come to that number in a minute. But in terms of the stock, not always about what the earnings are. It's what the market does. What did the market do? Amazon shares closed today at the 208.00 level, so 2800 roughly speaking. And that is a drop in the bucket to where it is at the moment, which is 3270. Now on this chart, this is of course about an hour after the market has closed. This can be different. Stocks can change immediately after the earnings come out and the market makes an initial reaction. Sometimes they can dig a little deeper in the numbers and find something about the forward guidance they don't like, and the street can punish the stock. But assuming that doesn't happen, we're going to see Amazon shares open up, roughly speaking, 15% or so higher and into this 3300 level. Let's keep these numbers simple as we go through the video. So where are we? What was the expected move? What play are we looking at? From Don's earnings based, we can build butterflies or build option premium, or at least look around what the expected move is if we want to play into the next day. That was pushing the price to about just shy of 3100. A decent move, and that's where these levels go. That's where I was projecting as well in terms of some other volatility measures, but just under 3100. Again, where are we? Right here. And if that happens, it'll be about twice or more the expected move. So as the numbers turn right now, the share price of Amazon has taken us back, again, if this holds, to the middle of the trading range, and we'll pull back to a larger perspective in a moment. But that trading range still exists about 3500, a little bit above that, and about 3200. And the price has returned, as we will, if we think about this like a bell curve distribution, it has returned to the mean or the middle or the average price. That is the spike earnings. On the other hand, as if Amazon earnings were not impressive enough, and they are impressive and they are quite active and moving. The other stock that was in play today, we discussed quite a bit here in TheoTrade, is Facebook. So Facebook shares were at the top of their range, top of a resistance point, and then they massively, I think about 3 times or so, went outside the expected move, or at least that option volatility. That doesn't count as today's session, but from yesterday. So shares traded into this 325 area. Again, a little bit of a sideways range for Facebook or Meta shares. And that went down about 25%, closed the day near the lows, down 27%. And on our Market Watch tab, this is the S&P 500. Little things to point out, not to be too concerned, but there is Amazon, which at one point in today's session was down about 7% ahead of the earnings. And that'll be made up in more, assuming these numbers hold into Friday's session. There is Meta. Facebook technically, but Meta. And that market cap has been slashed by 25%. So market cap is going to be shares outstanding and the price per share, generally speaking. And when 25% of the value of the stock gets cut, 25% of the market cap comes out. And that has reduced the box, or will be reducing the box, or the size and the influence in the S&P 100, 500, and of course the big one, the Nasdaq. Maybe opposite in Amazon, as we potentially see its market cap surge in the next session. So if you're ever curious about looking at market cap, this used to be $1 trillion. Facebook used to be, roughly speaking, near $1 trillion in market cap. You can see it right there. No longer. Not there. Roughly 25% of the market cap, so about 300 billion or so, was cut. Google, we saw its earnings not long ago, and it is upwards of almost $2 trillion, and we're looking at market cap. Just while we're on the topic, Microsoft 2.2 trillion. Biggest is Apple, and Apple is 2.8 trillion. Amazon, current numbers, 1.4 trillion. Facebook is in play. Facebook is reduced, but again, Amazon has traded higher. So these are just in the Market Watch tab, visualize. And this way you can see quickly what the market cap influence is on the Nasdaq, on the S&P 100, and the S&P 500. And that plays into the intraday trades and swing trades as well. So Facebook was down. And while we're on the topic, before we look at individual bigger picture stocks or daily charts, other stocks that had earnings today, other things that on a good day would have a good or at least some good news or some headlines, but not with Facebook and not with Amazon. Most traders are talking about the outcomes of those stocks and, of course, how that affects their portfolio, any positions they have, and the spillover effects to the tech sector or elsewhere. But Eli Lilly had earnings. It was down 2.5%. Honeywell had earnings. And again, these are before the bell. So these occurred before. Honeywell was down, pushing new lows. And Biogen also had earnings that was not necessarily, the earnings were not necessarily a big mover, a big driver of the stock, but 2% down is still 2% down. ConocoPhillips, similarly. And then Merck had its earnings as well. After the bell, there is Amazon, and not to be outdone, there's Ford. So Ford is actually down. It's pulling down from its 26 level on the daily chart here, and its expected move, option volatility, took it down to 17.50 or so, or 22.33. Saw that go down to 18.40, so not quite there for the full move of what is an option volatility expected. That's Ford. Bristol-Myers Squibb will report on Friday. So all these other stocks are overshadowed, but you may have positions in these, either putting on positions or containing or holding open positions, duration positions particularly. So these are in play, and these did affect many traders, but again, there was a lot of emphasis on Facebook recently, Google, and of course Amazon. Speaking of those, let's go to the bigger picture on all these stocks. Just the ones we want to highlight. So Amazon, mentioned it was in a long-term trading range. Let's see that on a bigger perspective. Go back about 3 years. And this is Amazon shares, roughly speaking, 1,600 and 2,000 for the better part of 2019 and 2020. Had a strong break to the upside, trend to the upside, range expansion, and that gave way to, from mid-2020 to present, a long-term sideways trading range. We'll get all the indicators off the chart and just highlight those price points. And again, think bell curve, think distributions, think fair value, and fair value for Amazon shares from this perspective, if we think about it like that, has been about the middle of the range, which is about 3,300. Now, the upper part of the range was about 3,500. So this would be considered over fair valuation, favoring the short of the puts of the market, short of the puts. And the same thing at the top, short of the puts. Down at the lower bound, that could be considered under fair valuation. And that was about 3,000. So simple numbers. I'm all about simple price levels in short-term trades. 3,000, 3,300, 3,500, and about 3,300. Sorry, 3,000. 3,000. 3,300. There's a 3,300 and 3,500. That is where Amazon trades, at least after its earnings, right back to fair valuation. Just like that was an overshoot too high, pulled back. That was an overshoot too high, back. So at the moment, Amazon shares are fairly priced at about 3,300. Outside of that, Google, we saw it, or Alphabet. It will be splitting its price. And it similarly maybe does not have a lengthy as a trading range that Amazon does, but nonetheless, we can think about same or similar logic. What is that? Support level, or the lower bound, is about 2,700, a little bit under that. Upper resistance is, strangely enough, about 3,000 for Google or Alphabet shares. And take that high, take that low right in the middle. That is roughly 2,850, so 2,850. That can be considered fair valuation, or at least the midpoint of a trading range, multi-month trading range. That meant up here was a short or bear, or at least a overbought fade opportunity. And by the same logic, this was an oversold bounce or return back to the mean. I like to measure trades as return not from top to low or low to high, but from high to mid, or high back to mid, or even low back to the mid. It does tend to overshoot that sometimes, but the trade setups or strategies would come from being short from above fair valuation and long or bullish, as best we can, from under or beneath fair valuation. And Facebook will be the one that is different. Facebook shares saw its performance, and this is why it is such a critical thing to watch and to note in your trading, even if you don't have positions in Facebook, and how devastating to the technology sector in general this outcome was. So Facebook shares traded from roughly 160, 180 or so, had a volatile 2020, but many stocks did, at least in the earlier part. 2021 was kind to Facebook shares in terms of a rally from 260 to 380, but the middle part, later part in the year, was not. So we saw Facebook shares tumble to 300, tried to recover, tried to bounce that back, but the earnings were less than stellar, and revenue losses and other components that sent the stock much lower. And that is pulling the Nasdaq down, at least for the moment. And we'll finish with looking at one more point of view on the stocks, or at least the ETF that was hit the hardest in today's session. That was the Qs. That's the Nasdaq. There is the QQQ. Downtrend all day. No bounce, no support, no rally into the close. Just straight down. Similarly on the Nasdaq itself. Nasdaq was down. And that is, of course, the last 15 minutes, and that's what we'll conclude with. The last 15 minutes of the Nasdaq today shows, and the after hours data shows us what's happening with Amazon. So taken all together, the Nasdaq itself was bearish, was a trend to the downside, and was weak, almost over 3% actually at the lows. The Nasdaq at the moment is coming up to the 14,803, which is here, which is roughly speaking where the Nasdaq opened. We'll be very careful to watch this in Friday's session, any additional earnings or news, but lots of volatility, lots of opportunities, and of course lots of risk. As always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Rosen with tonight's Theo video update for February 3rd, 2022.